This is the oldest Irish whiskey I have ever tasted. Let's review the Redbreast 27-year-old. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today we're going to be talking about the Redbreast 27-year-old Irish single pot still whiskey. Now, this is actually, in fact, the oldest Irish whiskey that I've ever had the pleasure of tasting. Now, this comes to us from the Midleton distillery in Ireland, which is the largest distillery in Ireland. It's the people behind the likes of Jameson, the Midleton Very Rare lines. They do distill, but not bottle, the spot range, like green spot, yellow spot, red spot, gold spot, all that. But they're very well known for their single pot still Irish whiskey line, which is the Redbreast series. You may have had Redbreast 12 or one of the other iterations at some point. So with Irish whiskey, it's notably triple distilled. Unlike most single malt Scotch distilleries, they usually do go ahead and do a double distillation, or somewhere between a double and a triple. Some like Hazelburn and Auchentoshan, they'll go ahead and do a triple distillation. But that's typically a difference between Irish and Scottish distilleries. This particular Irish whiskey is 27 years old, as I mentioned, but there's rumor of older whiskey in it. It's 53.1% cask strength. There's no statement on whether it's chill filtered or has color added on the box, on the website. I couldn't find anything. It also didn't mention it on Whiskey Base, so I hate to make assumptions, but I'm going to assume that it's possible. Whiskey makers, they have to start putting this on bottles or boxes for us to know, because it's important information. But I believe this is batch 3 of the Redbreast 27-year-old. So it's a 2021 bottling. And what's interesting about this whiskey, other than just the fact that it's a really old Irish whiskey, and there's not all that much old Irish whiskey out there, is the cask maturation profile. So it's ex-bourbon, it's ex-Oloroso sherry casks. So far, so good. It's pretty typical for Redbreast bottlings. But then they go ahead and they marry those casks and they mature them, or not mature, really, they finish them in Ruby Port pipes. They use the word enrichening, which the length of enrichening that I read online was about 105 days, which that's just a finish. So they finish them in Ruby Port pipes, which is still interesting. It's going to be cool to see what that does to this whiskey. Now, Irish pot still whiskey is focused on malt, malted barley still. So you have malted barley, you have unmalted barley. The rules around it are that you have to have at least 30% of each of those two components, and you can include up to 5% of another grain type, for instance, like oats. However, Midleton, with the Redbreast series at least, is one of the few Irish distilleries that actually doesn't opt to include any other type of grains, like oats. They use entirely barley. So unmalted and malted barley is what Redbreast uses. Interesting. The other really fascinating thing about this is, again, returning to these Ruby Port pipes that they used to finish this whiskey. I enjoy a nice port, especially around Christmas. And in 2016, after walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain, I went down to Portugal and I visited Porto, and actually Porto is probably my favorite of the larger cities in Portugal. It's beautiful, it's a working class town, there's some good football teams there. I enjoyed it. But while I was there, I made sure to go ahead and check out some of the port cellars on the other side of the Douro River. And that was a really cool experience. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot about port there. But one of the things about Ruby Port casks is that they're quite peculiar. Most Ruby Port is actually aged in stainless steel vats or concrete tanks. And that's because it's a young fortified wine that they don't actually want to have oxidative aging with, and they don't want much influence from casks. Some port houses, they do go ahead and age their Ruby Ports in oak casks, but they're really large oak casks. And again, that's to have very little influence from the oak. So it's interesting to see Ruby Port casks as the maturation type for this. Now, I'm not sure if that means that these casks are just Ruby Port wine seasoned casks, or they could be some of those rare ones that are actually used with these port houses. I'm not sure. It doesn't specify much. They're not long on details, it seems, with this whiskey. But just it's a curious cask maturation type, which makes this all the more interesting. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the importance of whiskey clubs. I've only recently actually joined my first whiskey club. I didn't actually think there was a whiskey club near me in the Fraser Valley in British Columbia. I thought they were all out towards Vancouver. And then early this year, I found actually there was a whiskey club, the Abbotsford Whisky Club. And Clayton is one of the founders. I believe he's the leader of that club. And so I joined the Abbotsford Whisky Club, and I've gone to, I think, 3, maybe 4 of the Whiskey Club meetings, and it's been wonderful. And I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of wonderful people. I've drank a lot of whiskey, and it's just been fun. And so that's where this sample came from. Was the Abbotsford Whisky Club. We had this one night at the Whisky Club, and Clayton offered me a sample to take home to go ahead and do a review on. And so that's what I'm doing here. Here's the little label and the logo that they use. So yeah, thank you, Clayton, for the sample, and I hope I do the whiskey justice with this review. Let's get to the review. Now, this whiskey, I believe it runs somewhere between $600 and $700 Canadian. It's quite pricey, but again, it is 27-year-old Irish single pot still whiskey. And on the nose, right away, it's orange, blood orange, grapefruit, berries, strawberries, cranberries, and a ton of oak. A lot of oak. Nose is not sharp, it's not jagged, it's nicely rounded, yet somehow fresh. So a really vibrant nose for a whiskey of this age. Oftentimes these older whiskeys can be a little shy. Probably the cask strength, 53 point something percent, that's helping with this. That oak is really prominent. Oh, this is like quintessential like fruit leather that you'd have in your elementary school lunches. Yeah, all those berries, all those dark fruits. But surprisingly, there's some tropical fruits showing up here too, like some mango or papaya or something. What I have noticed from this nose, and I really do enjoy the nose quite a bit, is that there are aspects of each cask type that are chiming in here. That tropical fruit is definitely coming from those ex-bourbon casks, along with some toffee and vanilla. Those Oloroso sherry casks, I'm sure, are behind some of that fruit leather, touch of chocolate, and some of those berries. And of course, the Ruby Port casks, I'm guessing that cranberry, those red berries, some strawberries. Between the 3 cask types, you can definitely pull the orange. I'm gonna guess the blood orange, like maybe even grapefruit note that I'm getting, is probably as a result of that Ruby Port cask. So really interesting nose. Almost like a hint of like a hazy IPA on that too. Yeah. Okay. Gonna take a sip. Okay, raisin. Oh, wow, okay. A ton of toasted oak, really well married with cinnamon and fruits. Oh, some chocolate. The cranberries in there too, again, with kind of like a a sweet and sour sort of vibe. There's some tartness to that fruit. And a certain there's a wine character to this as well. A little bit of a wine character, almost like a slight touch of like a Sauv Blanc sort of thing, which I know it's Ruby Port and sherry cask. It's not a wine cask, but I get kind of something reminiscent of Sauv Blanc there. Some like wood varnish notes. Yeah, just again, so much oak there. 27 years is coming through across on this palate. Again, nothing sharp, nothing jagged. Grapefruit, blood orange again, that's come across from the nose. It's on the palate. Oof, the finish is, gosh, all sorts of fruits, some spices. I'd say I can still, despite the finish in port pipes, I think I can still pick up that single pot still signature kind of spice. Yeah, the tannins are there, but not out of balance. Some steeped black tea. Oh man, okay, one more sip here. I'm really enjoying this. I am. Sometimes when you taste something in a group environment that is, sometimes loud or hectic, you're socializing, you're not really dialing in and focusing necessarily really hard on the whiskey. Sometimes you can miss things and maybe not appreciate it as much as you should. I remember on the night that we were tasting this, we also tasted an old brown label Deanston 18. And I was in love with that Deanston 18. That kind of stole the show for me. But that night I was also really feeling ex-bourbon casks and really clean maturation profiles. So maybe I didn't give it the justice the first time I had this. Yeah, the milk chocolate's in there too. There's seriously a metric ton of oak on that. But again, the sweet and sour interplay of the fruits really harmonizes it well. Wow, I don't know if I would spend $600 to $700 on this bottle. And I'm not necessarily an Irish whiskey enthusiast. I love all whiskeys, don't get me wrong. But if I'm spending that sort of money, I'm probably spending it on single malt Scotch. However, I would be tempted by this. This is really unique, and it really is something. Yeah, very interesting, very unique. I can't say I've ever had something quite like this. And I'm not sure if that's because it's just really old Irish or it's because of those Ruby Port casks. So I'm going to keep an eye out for more Ruby Port casks in the future. For a score on this whiskey, I've hum and hawed a bit in my mind as I'm thinking here. And I think it's going to go down to, it's probably for me an 89 out of 100. I was flirting with moving up to the 90, but 90 is something that has to be obvious in my mind that no, I want that in my collection. I need to buy a bottle of that, and I just don't feel that for this whiskey. But it's still a fantastic whiskey, and if Irish single pot still whiskey is your wheelhouse, if that is what you really enjoy and love and are enthusiastic about, I think this might be the whiskey for you. Yeah, well done, Redbreast. Well done, Midleton. So I want to thank you for watching once again, guys. I got some questions for you. Please comment down below. Do you have any memories of a special Irish whiskey that you've had in the past? And do you have any experience with Ruby Port casks as a finishing or maturation type? If so, let me know what you thought of them. Do you think that there's something that the whiskey industry should be utilizing more? All right, once again, thank you for joining me on Whiskey on the West Coast. If you go ahead and like, share, subscribe. That would be fantastic. If you're watching this video early, you may know or may not know that we have our first ever live stream coming up this Saturday, July 15th, I believe, at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Yeah, could be a gong show, could be fantastic. We'll see if the technology plays ball. But either way, I'm sure it's going to be fun. We'll be celebrating the fact that there's 1,000 of us now that are chatting about whiskey on Whiskey on the West Coast and enjoying it. So thank you so much for that, guys. I hope to see you on Saturday. And until next time, from the West Coast, Slunge.